My name is Evelyn Mercer, and 5 years of love, sacrifice, and lullabies came to a brutal end with a single sentence. You're not allowed to see him anymore. My daughter-in-law didn't scream it. She didn't cry. She said it like someone canceling a subscription. Cold. Final. Without eye contact. That sentence shattered more than just my heart. It tore through my identity, my purpose, and the little boy I'd raised like my own flesh and blood. So before you sit down and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth, because you might actually regret missing this dramatic story. I was there the day my grandson was born. He came early and my son Jake called me at 3 a.m. in a panic. Mom, it's happening. We're not ready. Of course they weren't. They were 25 and 26. They had jobs debt and zero clue how to hold a baby. But I did. I'd been a teacher for 35 years. I knew how to swaddle, soothe, feed, burp, and breathe through tears, both mine and theirs. I moved into their guest room the day after Theo was born. Just for a month, they said. That month turned into 6. Then a year. And then it just became life. Theo was my little shadow. His first steps were taken toward me. His first words weren't mama or dada. They were nana. Every scraped knee, every fever, every good dream whispered at bedtime. He brought them all to me. It wasn't that my daughter-in-law Amanda didn't love him, but she went back to work 6 weeks after the birth. Jake worked full-time too, and I filled the space in between. I became the middle of the sandwich. The glue. The hands that held everything. At first Amanda was grateful. Exhausted, yes. Distant, sure. But grateful. She called me a blessing. She left me little thank you notes on the fridge. On Mother's Day, she even gave me flowers. But somewhere around Theo's 3rd birthday, something started to change. It wasn't sudden. It was quiet, subtle. The kind of change you only notice when you're alone in bed at night, replaying the awkward silences and strange glances. She stopped calling me Mom. She started correcting me when I talked to Theo. When I said, "Come sit with Nana," she would interject, "Let him choose." When I baked cookies, she would whisper, "He's had too much sugar already." At first I brushed it off. New boundaries, I thought. Normal. Healthy. But the boundaries kept multiplying. I wasn't allowed to take Theo to the park anymore. Then I couldn't pick him up from daycare. Then I was told not to overstep by putting him to bed when they were home. Each rule was a thread pulled from the fabric of our bond. And Amanda pulled and pulled until I was barely holding on to the edges. Still, I told myself, be patient, be gracious. Love is stronger. Then came the day I will never forget. Theo had just turned 5. It was a Saturday. Amanda and Jake were supposed to go to a wedding. They asked me a week before to watch Theo overnight. I said yes, of course. I even bought his favorite dinosaur pajamas and planned a little movie night. Theo was excited. I was too, but the night before the wedding, Jake called. His voice was strange, mechanical. "Hey, Mom. Amanda's not comfortable with you watching Theo tomorrow." I blinked, confused. "Why not?" "Is everything okay?" There was a long silence. He said she doesn't think it's appropriate anymore. She thinks Theo needs space. Space from me. I asked, my voice cracking. I raised him. I've been with him every day since he was born. I know, Jake said softly, but it's what she wants. And what do you want? I asked. More silence. That's when I knew. Jake had chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. The next morning, I waited anyway. I made pancakes. I laid out the pajamas. I pretended just for a moment that it was all a misunderstanding, but they never came. Later that afternoon, Amanda herself arrived. No Theo, just her. She stood at the threshold, arms crossed. "Evelyn," she said flatly, "I think it's best you take some time away from Theo. He's getting confused about who his primary caregiver is." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Confused?" I said. "He's a child. He loves me. I've never tried to take your place." She shrugged, maybe not on purpose. "But you've had too much influence. It's time for us to parent without interference." I looked past her, hoping Theo was in the car waiting. He wasn't. I realized in that moment that something far deeper had shifted. This wasn't about bedtime stories or sugar. This was about power, control, and maybe jealousy. "You don't get to erase me," I said quietly. Amanda looked at me, eyes cold. You're not his mother, Evelyn. And starting now, you're not allowed to see him anymore. She turned and walked away, and I stood in the doorway clutching a little pair of dinosaur pajamas in my hand, not knowing that this was just the beginning of the storm. The next few days felt like I was living inside a snow globe, silent, shaken, suspended in someone else's storm. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Theo's face. His little dimples, the way he said Nana read again, and how he'd curl his fingers around mine as he drifted off. But now silence, no calls, no visits, and worse, no answers. I called Jake once, just once. It rang twice before going to voicemail. Jake, I said, trying not to let the tremble in my voice show. Please tell me this is temporary. Please tell me you understand what this is doing to me. To Theo. I never got a reply. I began to question everything. Had I crossed a line? Had I unknowingly made Amanda feel like I was competing with her? I went back through texts, conversations, memories. I couldn't find one moment where I had done anything but love that child and support his parents the best way I knew how. But memory is cruel when you're grieving. It reshapes truth to feed your pain. One afternoon, I drove past their house. Just a glimpse, I told myself. Maybe Theo would be in the yard. I parked across the street, heart pounding. There were toys scattered on the porch. A red tricycle, a bubble wand. Then the door opened. Amanda stepped out with Theo. He looked taller. His hair was longer. My heart leapt and then sank. He didn't see me. She took his hand and led him to the car. She buckled him in, started the engine, and they drove away without a single glance in my direction. I felt invisible. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table staring at an empty mug. I didn't need tea. I needed purpose. For 5 years, my life revolved around a small boy who needed me. And now, the silence of my home echoed louder than any tantrum or bedtime whisper ever could. I reached for the photo album I kept on the bookshelf. The one with Theo's chubby face pressed against mine at the zoo. The one where he had cake on his nose. The one where he'd fallen asleep on my chest in the rocking chair. Every picture was proof of a love that had built a whole world. And every picture hurt like a bruise I kept pressing. I decided I couldn't just sit and mourn. I needed to understand. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my oldest friend, Lillian. She was the kind of friend who never said, "How are you?" because she always knew. The moment I told her what happened, she exhaled hard. "Oh, honey, this sounds like a power shift." Amanda probably always planned to take over once Theo hit a certain age. 5 is when they start remembering, when identity takes root. But why cut me out? I asked. Why not share him? Because some people see sharing as losing, not growing. That hit me hard. We talked for hours about daughter-in-law dynamics, about generational differences, about the quiet war women fight when love collides with boundaries. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel crazy. I felt wounded, yes, but not wrong. Still, that didn't change reality. I had no legal rights, no visitation agreement. Everything was built on trust, and that trust was gone. I tried sending Theo a letter, a simple card with a dinosaur sticker and the words, "Nana loves you to the moon." It was returned unopened. I considered lawyers. But how do you fight to see a child who isn't legally yours without turning the whole family into a courtroom? And would I really do that to Jake? To Theo? I sat with that question for days. The pain was unbearable. But what scared me more was the idea that Theo might forget me. That 5 years of stories, songs, and scraped knees might vanish from his memory like chalk from a sidewalk after the rain. So I made a decision. If I couldn't be in his life directly, I'd still be part of it. Indirectly. I began writing him letters every week. I didn't send them. I kept them in a box. I wrote about the weather, about the blue jay that nested in the oak tree outside my window, about the time he said, "Nana, you make the best peanut butter planets." Every letter was a thread, a tether, a record. Because if there ever came a day when he asked, "Where were you?" I would have an answer. I was right here, loving you the whole time. Then, on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the cutoff, I got an unexpected knock at the door. It was Mrs. Langford, my neighbor across the street. She held a folded piece of paper in her hand. Her eyes were wide. "I think this is for you," she whispered. I unfolded the paper slowly. It was a crayon drawing, a stick figure with gray hair and glasses holding hands with a small boy. Above them was a heart, and beneath it scrawled in a 5-year-old's shaky print, "To Nana, I miss you." I sat down on the porch step, the wind carrying away my breath. Theo remembered they could cut me out of their lives, their plans, their rigid little boxes, but they couldn't cut me out of his heart. And that, I realized, was the beginning of my quiet resistance. The moment I held that drawing in my hands, something changed inside me. It was like someone had relit a candle I thought had gone cold for good. Theo remembered. He missed me. That tiny sentence in a 5-year-old's scrawl hit harder than any legal letter or adult justification ever could. But there was something else about that drawing that struck me. He had somehow gotten it to me, which meant someone helped him. I walked across the street and knocked on Mrs. Langford's door. She opened immediately, as if expecting me. "I hope I didn't overstep," she said gently. "Theo was with his nanny the other day. He tugged on my sleeve and asked if I knew where you lived." I said, "Of course I do." Then he handed me that folded paper. He whispered, "Give this to Nana. Please don't tell Mommy." My heart clenched. "He has a nanny now." She nodded. "Almost full-time. Amanda barely interacts with him outside scheduled hours. It's all very organized. Organized. Controlled. Sterile." It made me furious. But it also gave me a sliver of hope. Maybe if Theo could still reach for me, I could find a way to stay present in his life without crossing the line Amanda had drawn in thick red ink. So I wrote back. It wasn't much. Just a small note tucked inside a children's book I knew he loved, Where the Wild Things Are. I wrote, "Miss you more than peanut butter toast and bedtime stories combined. Be wild. Be brave. Nana." I slipped the note into an envelope and brought it to Mrs. Langford. "I don't want you to get in trouble," I said. She waved her hand. "Honey, I'm 71 years old. Trouble and I have an arrangement." We both laughed, but there was a tremor beneath my smile. Because what we were doing, quiet, simple, pure, was now considered rebellion. That Sunday I watched from behind my blinds as Amanda pulled into the driveway, unbuckled Theo, and led him inside. He clutched the book against his chest. He didn't look back, but I saw his little shoulders bounce with excitement. I didn't need anything more. That bounce was enough. Over the next few weeks I kept writing. Not every day, just enough. A drawing here, a note there, a sticker, a pressed flower, small pieces of love in envelopes. I knew Amanda would lose her mind if she found out. But I wasn't trying to win. I was trying not to disappear. And then something happened. Jake called me. Not Amanda. Not a lawyer. Jake. His voice was shaky. "Mom, I know she's been strict, but Theo keeps asking about you." He drew a family tree in class and cried when the teacher asked him where his Nana went. I said nothing. "Let the silence do the talking." He sighed. "Amanda doesn't want him confused. She thinks he needs structure, and I'm—" "What chaos?" I snapped. Jake paused. "No, you're the heartbeat. You were his world, Mom." I just didn't realize how much until now. I leaned against the wall, tears burning behind my eyes. "Then why did you let this happen?" "Because I was tired," he admitted. "Because Amanda has a way of making everything sound like logic even when it's cruelty." I wanted to scream at him, shake him, tell him to grow a spine. But I didn't, because I knew what it was like to be in a marriage where love was a chessboard and you didn't want to lose any more pieces. "Jake," I said, "I don't want to fight. I just want to love my grandson." "I know," he whispered, "and I'm going to find a way. Just be patient with me." And for a moment I believed him. But belief is fragile, and it shattered just 1 week later. It was a Wednesday morning when I opened my mailbox and found a thick envelope inside. At first I thought it was another letter from Theo, until I saw the return address. It was from Amanda's attorney. Inside was a formal notice, an informal no-contact request, not a legal restraining order, but a formal statement that I was no longer welcome to attempt communication with Theo or Amanda in any way. It was signed by Amanda and Jake. The air left my lungs. They had drawn the final line, and this time they put it in ink. The betrayal stung more because it came just days after Jake had called me. After he had sounded like my son again, I sat down on the floor with the letter in my hands and realized I had no power, no rights, no say. I wasn't his legal guardian. I had no custody. I was in the eyes of the law just a relative with memories and hope. And those aren't enough in court. Mrs. Langford knocked an hour later. You all right? I nodded but didn't stand. They sent me a letter. To stop. Her eyes hardened. They can't stop you from loving him. No, I said. But they can make sure he never sees it. That night I didn't write. I didn't fold any drawings. I didn't whisper bedtime wishes into the void. I just sat in the dark and stared at a closed door in my heart. But grief has strange allies, and mine came from a stranger. The next day, I got a call from Theo's preschool teacher. Mrs. Becker. She found my number from a birthday party invitation I'd once sent. I know I'm not supposed to be contacting you, she said quickly, but I thought you should know. Theo brought in a box of letters today. He said they were from you. I closed my eyes. That little rebel, that brave boy, he told the class you're his favorite person, that you taught him how to hug the moon. I laughed through the tears. That sounds like something I'd say. Mrs. Becker lowered her voice. They're planning to transfer him. Amanda doesn't want him influenced by unstructured emotional attachments. My chest tightened. Do you know where? No, she said. But he left this in his cubby. She emailed me a photo. It was a drawing. A rocket ship with a sign. Nana's heart. And inside a stick figure waving. I stared at it for a long time. Amanda could take him away. Jake could stay silent. But Theo had launched a message into space. He was trying to find his way back. And that meant I had to do the same. I didn't sleep that night. The image of that little rocket ship Nana's heart glowed in my mind like a lighthouse in the fog. I realized I had been navigating this grief as if I were drowning. But maybe I wasn't supposed to sink. Maybe I was supposed to send light back. I pulled out the wooden chest I'd once used for Theo's storybooks. Inside were the unsent letters, the folded drawings, the silly little poems I wrote just for him. A collection of love that had no postage but still traveled between our hearts. I spent the next few days digitizing them. I scanned every page, labeled each file by date-added descriptions so I wouldn't forget what sparked each one. I didn't know what I would do with them yet, only that I had to protect them, preserve them, just in case. Because even if they moved him across the country, even if Amanda scrubbed me from their version of his life, I wanted there to be a trail, a record, a lighthouse. Then, one afternoon, while organizing the files, I stumbled upon an idea, a blog, not one with my name, not one to shame anyone, but a quiet place, anonymously written, dedicated to the act of grandparenting through loss. I called it Letters to the Moon, a nod to the bedtime stories I used to tell Theo when he asked if the moon had ears. I posted the letters one by one, no names, just raw, honest reflections from a woman grieving a child who wasn't dead, just unreachable. The blog didn't go viral, not at first. But slowly I began to see comments. My daughter-in-law banned me from seeing my grandbaby too. I raised my grandson from birth. Now they pretend I don't exist. Reading this felt like hearing my own heart speak. I wasn't alone. We were thousands of invisible grandmothers stitched into the seams of broken families, quietly enduring. The blog gave me something to hold on to, not just for Theo, but for myself. And then, out of nowhere, it got traction. One of the letters, the one I titled The Rocket Ship and the Cubbyhole, was picked up by a parenting advocacy site. They shared it. And suddenly, Letters to the Moon had over 20,000 views. I wasn't sure how to feel. Pride. Fear. What if Amanda found it? But I also thought, maybe Jake would see it. Maybe in the sea of viral noise, something would finally reach him. Then it happened. On a rainy Tuesday morning, I got an email. No subject line. Just one sentence. You wrote the rocket story, didn't you? It was signed J. I didn't reply right away. I stared at the screen for hours, wondering what game this might be. But then another email. This time longer. I've read every letter. Every post. I cried through most of them. I'm sorry, Mom. I was afraid. Afraid of conflict. Afraid of losing Theo in a custody war. Amanda made me choose, and I didn't choose you. But I never stopped hoping you'd fight. You did in your own way. And I see that now. I broke. Just sat in front of the monitor sobbing. I didn't know what would happen next, whether Jake would ever grow a spine strong enough to act. But I knew I had reclaimed one thing I feared I'd lost forever. My voice. And with that voice, I started a new entry on the blog. Entry title: If you're reading this someday, Theo, you were 5 when they told me I couldn't see you anymore. But I kept writing. I kept loving. I kept building a bridge word by word in case you ever wanted to cross it. Wherever you are, whatever age you read this, know this: you were never forgotten. You are always, always the moon. 3 days later, the blog passed 50,000 readers. I began receiving requests from magazines, podcasts, support groups. And one message stood out. A woman named Linda wanted to interview me for a documentary about alienated grandparents. I think your story is the heart of this whole movement, she said. I laughed through the phone. I'm not a movement. I'm just a woman who misses her grandson. She replied softly, That's why you matter. I agreed. Because I wasn't just doing this for Theo anymore. I was doing it for every nana, mimi, abuela, and grandma who had loved too deeply and lost too quietly. Then, just when I thought things couldn't shift any further, the letter came. This one wasn't from a lawyer, or a neighbor, or even Jake. It was from Theo, written in crayon, mailed with a stamp. No return address, just a big scribbled heart on the back. Inside was a folded piece of paper, 6 words. I found your moon, Nana. I held that letter like it was made of gold. I found your moon, Nana. 6 words that cracked my heart wide open and stitched it together all at once. I didn't know how he found the blog. Maybe Jake showed him. Maybe Amanda slipped. Maybe someone printed the letters out and handed them to him one quiet afternoon in defiance of silence. But it didn't matter how. He found it. And now he had found me. I read the letter again and again, as if the words would change, as if some hidden message might appear between the lines. But it was perfect as it was. That crayon-scrawled sentence said more than any adult explanation could. Theo remembered. He loved me still. But love in situations like ours doesn't guarantee access. It doesn't fix the locked doors or silence the gatekeepers. It doesn't rewrite custody papers or dissolve bitterness. So I had a choice to make. I could hold this moment, this miracle, and retreat. Again, preserve it in amber, like something too fragile to touch. Or I could act. I emailed Jake again. He wrote me, I don't know how, but he did. I will honor the rules you and Amanda laid out, but I won't stay quiet anymore. You don't have to choose between your wife and your mother. You only have to choose what's right for your son. If he reached for me, it means he's still hurting. And I will not let him think his Nana disappeared. He didn't reply for 2 days. When he finally did, his email was longer, less guarded. Amanda doesn't know he wrote to you. She's furious about the blog. She thinks it's manipulative. I think it's the only honest thing I've read in years. She wants to move again. Says it's time for a fresh start. But I'm tired of running. I've started the paperwork. I'm asking for joint custody. It's going to be messy and painful. But if I don't do it now, I'll lose both of you. I stared at that last line. I'll lose both of you. For the first time, I believed Jake might finally be waking up. And yet, in the background of all this, court dates, custody battles, rising tension, there was Theo. Still small, still growing, still needing love that wasn't fractured by courtrooms or conditioned by adult fear. So I wrote him another letter. Not online, not public, just a real letter. I kept it simple. Dear Moonbeam, I got your message. I found it in the stars in my teacup in the cracks of my garden path. It found me everywhere I go. You are my moon too, and I will always be looking up. Love, Nana. This time I mailed it with a return address. See, I didn't care if Amanda found it. I didn't care if she tore it up. I needed Theo to know I wasn't hiding. And then the tide turned again. It came quietly. A knock on the door late Friday afternoon. I opened it and there stood Jake. No warning, no email, no call, just him. With Theo, my knees nearly gave out. Theo's eyes lit up the way a sunrise splits the ocean, pure and unstoppable. He didn't say a word, just ran to me. I fell to my knees, arms wide, and he crashed into me like he had been waiting 5 years to breathe. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even sob. I just held him. Jake stood behind watching us. She went to a conference in Chicago. I had the weekend. I didn't ask permission. He looked older, worn down, but also resolute. I don't know what's going to happen, he said, but I needed him to remember who you are. With his own eyes. We spent that weekend in our little bubble. I made Theo grilled cheese sandwiches with the crusts cut off. We watched The Iron Giant and cried at the same parts. He slept in his old fort made of chairs and blankets. I read him 3 stories each night. He asked for 4. I gave him 5. He asked if I was coming back to stay forever. I didn't have the heart to lie, so I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Someday." On Sunday night, Jake packed him back into the car. Amanda would be home in a few hours. Theo hugged me tighter than I thought possible. I read all the letters, Nana, even the one with the moon. "I know, sweetheart. You're the moon too." I smiled. Then, we're always looking at the same sky. Jake put his hand on my shoulder. "I've hired a lawyer. She's brutal but fair. I'm not fighting Amanda. I'm fighting for Theo." And for once, I believed him. I watched them drive away, the taillights disappearing down our quiet street. And then I walked inside, sat down at my desk, and wrote the next blog post. Entry title: "The weekend the moon came home. You can survive the silence. You can endure the exile. But the day they run back into your arms, that is the day you remember why you stayed soft. Why you kept writing. Why you refused to harden your heart even when everything told you to. Because love is patient, and sometimes love wins." By the next morning, that post had over 100,000 views. But I didn't care, because now love had a face again, and it smiled like a 5-year-old who remembered the sound of my voice. The following weeks moved like a trembling line of dominoes, slow at first, but unstoppable once momentum kicked in. Jake kept his promise. He filed for joint custody. Amanda, as expected, erupted. Legal threats, angry voicemails, accusations. She accused Jake of endangering their son's psychological well-being by allowing contact with a woman who manipulated through blogs and sob stories. She meant me. The irony didn't escape me. A woman who had erased me from her child's life was now accusing me of warping reality. But I didn't respond. I didn't post about it. I didn't rant online. I didn't even correct the whispers in our small community. Instead, I continued writing. Letters to the Moon became more than a blog. It became a sanctuary. Other grandparents started submitting their own stories, and I curated them like sacred objects. I turned the website into a collaborative platform. We offered writing prompts, monthly themes, and even a directory of legal resources. One letter stood out. From a woman in Minnesota. "My daughter told me that if I wanted to see my grandson, I had to sign a contract promising to never contradict her parenting choices." I signed it. Then she never brought him again. Her pain felt identical to mine, like a puzzle piece from my own story. I read the letter aloud at our first Zoom support meeting. Over 50 grandparents tuned in. We cried together, laughed through tears. And most of all, we made each other feel less invisible. Jake called more often now, sometimes about legal questions, other times just to talk. The distance between us softened, not healed, but soft enough to cross without splinters. Theo started sending drawings again. One was of a moon and a little house. Inside the house was a figure labeled Nana, and outside was a boy with a telescope. He wrote, "I see you." It gutted me in the best way. But Amanda wasn't done. Jake received a cease and desist letter from her lawyer. No further contact between child and grandmother until resolution in family court. It wasn't binding yet, not officially. But it was a warning. And Jake for the first time stood up to her. He sent her a counter letter through his attorney. "Our son has a right to know the people who love him. His grandmother raised him with more tenderness than most people experience in a lifetime. We will not sever that bond because of adult egos." Bold, direct, legal. Jake was finally becoming the man I once hoped he'd grow into. In the meantime, I prepared. I gathered every card, every photo, every proof of my role in Theo's life. I wasn't about to walk into a court with only a blog and a broken heart. And just when I thought we were ready, Amanda struck harder. She filed a petition for full legal custody, with a clause requesting no grandparent visitation rights. My hands trembled when Jake told me, "She's trying to erase you. Permanently." I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat down, took a breath, and looked him in the eyes. "Then we go to war." "But we fight with grace." He nodded, jaw clenched. "I won't let her win." I knew what he meant. But I also knew that winning didn't always mean destroying someone. Sometimes it meant outlasting them. Sometimes it meant showing the court a kind of love so unshakable, so rooted in presence and history, that no smear campaign could uproot it. Jake's lawyer filed a counter motion for grandparent rights, citing the 5 years I was Theo's primary caregiver. She included video evidence, birthday parties, preschool events, doctor visits where I signed as emergency contact. She called me a psychological parent. It was the first time in months I felt legally seen. As we prepared for court, Theo kept writing. He didn't understand custody, but he understood love. One drawing was of 3 stick figures holding hands under a giant moon. Me, Daddy, Nana. He didn't include Amanda. I didn't cheer about that. It wasn't a victory. It was a reflection of what had been broken. The night before the first hearing, I sat with a cup of tea staring at the moon through my kitchen window. I whispered to the stars like I had with Theo so many times before. Let truth speak louder than bitterness. Then I turned off the lights and went to bed, holding one of Theo's letters to my chest. In court the next day, Amanda wore sharp heels and a sharper expression. Her lawyer emphasized emotional overstepping, citing my blog and how it weaponized sympathy. Jake's lawyer countered with a photo slideshow. Theo as a baby in my arms, his first words caught on video while I rocked him on the porch swing, his tiny voice calling me Mama Nana. The judge listened, eyes unreadable. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't recite legal jargon. I told the story of the little boy who once fell asleep with his hand wrapped around my finger, of how he asked me what love smelled like, and I said, peanut butter and sunshine. Of how we wrote letters to the moon, because we both believed someone somewhere was listening. I'm not asking for revenge, I told the court. I'm asking for a seat at the table I helped build. The room was silent. Amanda didn't look at me. Theo wasn't allowed in court, but in my mind I could see him, watching, waiting. I stepped down from the stand, heart pounding but soul intact. Outside, Jake squeezed my hand. "You were incredible." I shook my head. I was honest. The judge adjourned, decision pending. We would have to wait. But I already knew the truth. Even if the verdict went against me, even if Amanda moved to another state, even if I never saw Theo again, he would still be looking at the moon. And so would I. Waiting for a judge's ruling is like holding your breath underwater. At first it's tolerable, but eventually your lungs start screaming. For 2 weeks I floated in that breathless space. Every call from Jake made my heart skip. Every email notification froze my hands midair, but no decision came. Instead, life dripped forward in small, trembling steps. Jake and I started rebuilding something not just for Theo, but for ourselves. We spoke on the phone like old friends rediscovering shared history. He asked about my favorite books. I told him how much I missed the sound of Theo's giggle during bubble baths. Sometimes we said nothing, and it was enough. Meanwhile, Letters to the Moon took on a life of its own. A grandmother in Atlanta posted a series of watercolor paintings inspired by her estranged granddaughter's bedtime stories. Another from Idaho created a lullaby album music she used to sing to the twins she hadn't seen in 2 years. We weren't just grieving, we were archiving love. The site began receiving media attention. Local outlets wanted interviews. One morning, I found myself on a podcast called Family Shadows, sharing my story with a trembling voice and a heart that beat louder than my microphone. I don't hate my daughter-in-law, I told the host, but I resent what fear has made of her, because I know fear. It nearly made me disappear too. I thought Amanda might hear it. I didn't know if I wanted her to, but the idea of her hearing my truth without the filter of rage that felt fair. Then the envelope came, a plain white one with the county court seal. I stared at it for an hour before opening it. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped my tea. I unfolded the paper. Read the words. Read them again. Then I sat down, and I wept. Joint custody granted. Grandparent visitation awarded every other weekend. The court acknowledged the 5 years I had spent as Theo's psychological parent. They cited unusually strong emotional bonds and found no evidence that contact with me harmed the child. Amanda had lost the motion to exclude me. Jake had won shared parenting time. I had not been erased. I called Jake. "I got it," I said, voice catching. "I'm outside," he replied. I opened the door. There they were. Jake holding Theo's tiny hand, and Theo holding a suitcase. I packed my astronaut pajamas. He shouted, racing past me into the house. I blinked back tears as Jake followed slowly, his shoulders lighter than I'd seen in years. "She's furious," he said quietly, "but the court is the court. And honestly, I think she needed the boundary." So did I. I nodded. We all did. The weekend was joy stitched together with trembling. Theo ran through the house like a boy reclaiming his kingdom. We played old board games and made banana bread with too many chocolate chips. He showed me drawings of rockets and monsters and a new friend named Caleb who can do backflips but cries when he misses his mom. We wrote a new letter to the moon. "Dear Moon, I'm back. Nana says love is like soup. You can freeze it and warm it up again and it still tastes good. I think she's right. I missed you. Love, Theo." I pinned it to the fridge. On Sunday evening, Jake lingered while Theo packed up. "He wants to stay longer," he said, voice low. I smiled. "That's a good problem to have." Jake hesitated. "Amanda's not speaking to me." "Not really. But I've started therapy. For myself, I'm tired of being the man who stands silently while good things fall apart." He looked at me. I was wrong. About a lot of things. And I'm sorry I let her turn Theo into a bargaining chip. "You were scared," I replied. "But now you're choosing love over fear. That matters more than anything you did before." He nodded, swallowing hard. Theo gave me one last squeeze. "Don't forget me when I'm back on the planet." "I never do, Moonbeam. I see you every night." And then he was gone again. But this time I didn't crumble. This time I stood taller. Because now love had documentation. Love had a schedule. Love had a courtroom victory. Still, it wasn't all smooth. Amanda filed an appeal. She started questioning Theo about our time together. At school, she insisted teachers report any mention of me. One counselor told Jake she seemed paranoid and over-controlling. And yet I didn't retaliate. I just kept showing up. Every other weekend, I made sure Theo had routine joy and safety. We created traditions. Moon soup night on Saturdays. Reading poetry on the porch. Sending anonymous letters of kindness to neighbors. He started calling me Nana Moon. I didn't ask for it. It just happened. One night after he fell asleep, I opened the blog and wrote the most honest line I'd ever typed. Forgiveness isn't always a reunion. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to love louder than bitterness. The post went viral. Parents wrote in. Teachers. Even adult children estranged from their own parents. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us. Those who'd lost people they still loved, and those finding ways to love them anyway. One message stood out. From a woman in Oregon. "My mother and I didn't speak for 18 years. Then she wrote me a letter about soup. I cried for 3 days. Now we talk every Tuesday." That's when I realized, sometimes storytelling isn't about resolution. It's about resonance. And mine had finally begun to echo. The return of Theo into my life felt like the first breath after surfacing from deep water, beautiful, necessary, and tinged with fear that it could be taken away again. But I refused to let fear be the narrator. Instead, I turned to ritual. Every time Theo came over, I lit the same candle. Vanilla bean and honey, his favorite scent since he was 2. I baked the same banana bread using the same wooden spoon with a crack down the middle that he used to call the magic wand. And we kept writing letters to the moon. He asked once, "Do you think the moon keeps them all?" I said, "I think the moon remembers everything love ever wrote." But beneath our sweetness, Amanda's shadow loomed. Her appeal was moving forward. Jake was told by his lawyer that the next round would be nastier, more personal. Amanda had switched attorneys to someone known for dragging cases into emotional trench warfare. She'd subpoenaed my blog posts. She submitted screenshots of Theo's drawings as evidence of undue influence. One in particular had her furious. A crayon drawing of me with angel wings holding a sign that said, "Nana Moon loves forever." I'd cried when I first saw it. Now it was being used as ammunition. Jake was shaken. "She's saying you're manipulating him emotionally, that you're planting ideas." I looked at him steady. "I'm giving him safety. You know that." "I do," he replied. "But a judge might not." And that was the hardest part. Truth didn't always win in court. Sometimes optics did. And Amanda, for all her rage, knew how to present herself well. I began writing less publicly. I archived my more emotional blog entries. I told our readers why. Sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we protect while they're still being written. And in the privacy of my home, I documented everything. I started keeping a visitation log: what we did, what Theo ate, how he felt, what he said. I included photos, timestamps, receipts. It felt clinical, but it was armor. In case I had to go to battle again. Jake, too, became more vigilant. He started documenting Amanda's texts, especially the ones that accused me of witchcraft or called me a decaying influence. Some of them were chilling. One read, "If Theo grows up thinking that woman is safe, don't come crying to me when he's broken." I never showed those to Theo. Instead, we played Rocket Chef and cooked galaxy pancakes with blueberries and whipped cream stars. He built Lego cities. I let him interview me on his toy microphone like I was on the news. One day he asked, "Did Mommy ever love you?" I froze. "What makes you ask that?" "Because she said you never liked her. But you always say kind things." I crouched to his level. "I always wanted her to feel welcome. But sometimes people carry hurt in their hearts, and it changes how they see the world." He thought about it. "Is that why she looks so mad when I say your name?" Maybe, I whispered. "But that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong." Theo nodded, then went back to building a Lego rocket. The matter in his mind was settled, but mine churned. I wondered if Amanda ever thought about those early days when I first offered to help after Theo was born. How I brought her tea while she napped. How I canceled book club for weeks just to hold Theo at midnight so she could sleep. Back then, I truly believed we could be family, until I became inconvenient. Until I became the mirror that reminded her she wasn't doing it alone. That week, Jake's lawyer scheduled a mediation session, a final attempt before the appeal proceeded to court again. Amanda agreed. The room was beige and silent. Amanda arrived in a sharp navy suit, lips tight. I wore the cardigan Theo had once smeared applesauce on. I wasn't there to impress, just to tell the truth. The mediator was gentle but firm. "We're here for one reason: to center the well-being of your son, not to vindicate pain, not to settle grudges." Amanda bristled. "He's my son." Jake leaned forward. "He's our son. And Mom raised him for 5 years when we couldn't." "That matters." "She undermines me. She loves him. She's turning him against me." Jake paused, then said something that changed the air in the room. "No, you're doing that. Every time you turn love into a battlefield, you teach Theo that relationships are dangerous." Amanda's mouth tightened, but she didn't interrupt. The mediator turned to me. "Evelyn, what are you willing to agree to?" I inhaled. "I'm willing to document every visit. I'm willing to avoid public posts. I'm even willing to attend co-grandparenting therapy if it helps. But I won't vanish. And I won't pretend that 5 years of raising Theo didn't happen." Amanda didn't respond right away. Then, to everyone's surprise, she asked quietly, "Would you write me a letter?" I blinked. "What kind of letter?" "Like the ones you write Theo. Just one. About who you think I am, or was, or could be." Silence hung heavy. Then I said, "Yes." That night I wrote. I didn't sugarcoat, but I didn't weaponize. I wrote about the time she made Theo laugh so hard with sock puppets he snorted apple juice. I wrote about how beautiful she looked holding him for the first time, even through her tears. I wrote about how I hoped we could someday sit beside each other at his graduation, not as rivals, but as the 2 women who loved him first. I sent the letter. She didn't reply. But she didn't block visitation either, and that for now was enough. Autumn arrived like a hush after a storm. soft golden leaves blanketing the sidewalks, and for the first time in years, my house felt like a home again. Theo skipped through the front door on his weekend visits, no longer tiptoeing as if afraid he might not be welcome. His backpack was heavier, filled with schoolwork and stories, but his shoulders were lighter. We fell into rhythm. Fridays were for board games and pizza with too much cheese. Saturdays were for morning pancakes and afternoon park walks. Sundays, those were hard. Saying goodbye always stung, no matter how many times we did it. But even in the ache, there was peace. Amanda had not rescinded the appeal, but she had grown quiet. Her silence was no longer aggressive. It was tentative. Watching, waiting, perhaps reading my letter again and again, trying to see if it was a trick. It wasn't. Theo flourished. His teacher said he was engaged and emotionally grounded. He'd started drawing comics featuring a character named Captain Moonbeam, who saved the galaxy by hugging black holes until they cried. I knew what that meant. Theo was healing. So was I. One Sunday evening, after Jake picked him up, I lingered at the door longer than usual. The house felt too still. I walked into the guest room, Theo's room now, and looked at the shelves he'd slowly filled. Papercraft's books, a rock, he insisted was from the moon. Then my eyes landed on something I hadn't noticed before. Tucked into the corner of his pillow was a small folded note. It read, "Nana, I'll always come back, even if Mommy gets mad again." I sat down. My hand covered my mouth as tears slipped through. There was so much packed into that sentence. Loyalty, love, fear. A child trying to reassure the adult who had reassured him for 5 years. Later that week, I received a phone call. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello." Silence. Then, "It's Amanda." My spine stiffened. "Hi, I read your letter," she said. Her voice was tight, controlled. "Twice." "I'm glad," I replied gently. Long pause. "I didn't know how to talk to you without feeling judged." I swallowed. "I never wanted you to feel judged. I wanted you to feel supported. Maybe I failed at showing that." She exhaled. "You didn't fail. I was just afraid that you loved him more than I could." The line went still again. Then I said something I never thought I'd say. Maybe I did. But it wasn't a competition. It was reinforcement. She gave a short laugh. Bitter but honest. "He loves you," she said quietly. "I know," I whispered. "I'm still angry," she confessed. "At Jake. At myself. At you sometimes." "Anger's honest," I said. "Just don't let it be permanent." Silence again. Then, "Would you like to come to his school recital next month?" I blinked. "Yes, very much." She didn't say anything else. Just hung up. But that olive branch, tiny, awkward, half-splintered, was enough. A few days later, Jake dropped Theo off with an envelope. "From Amanda," he said, surprised. Inside was a single piece of paper, handwritten. "Thank you for writing the letter. I've decided not to pursue the appeal. Theo deserves peace, and I need time to heal too." Below it, P. Sis. The moon letters. I saved one. The one about soup. I closed my eyes. Somewhere the circle had closed, just a little. I began writing again. Not for the court, not for the world, but for Theo. And Amanda. And myself. I wrote a letter called "To the Women Who Raised the Same Boy." It was part memory, part apology, part hope. Theo drew a cover for it. 2 women holding a child's hand under a starry sky. I printed a few copies, bound them simply. One went to Amanda, one stayed in Theo's room, and one I mailed to the moon. Just because. The school auditorium smelled like old varnish and crayon wax. I hadn't stepped into a place like this in years, and my heart pounded as I walked toward the row of chairs reserved for family. It wasn't fear. It was unfamiliarity. Like stepping onto a stage you used to perform on. Only now the cast had changed. Amanda was already there. She wore a dark green blouse, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, looking every bit the composed mother. She didn't look at me when I sat beside her, but she didn't move, either. That, I told myself, was progress. Jake stood in the aisle, giving us both a small, hopeful smile. He mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded. The lights dimmed. Children in mismatched costumes took the stage, narrating something about the solar system and kindness and galactic cooperation. It was charming, chaotic, and perfect. Then Theo stepped into the spotlight. He wore a silver cape and held a cardboard telescope. His line came at the end. Even when you're lost in space, love will always find you. Just follow the moon. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Not dramatic gasps, just soft collective exhalations. Amanda leaned slightly forward. Theo spotted me in the crowd. His smile flickered, then steadied. And just before the curtain fell, he whispered toward the wings, not realizing the mic was still hot. I saw you, Nana. After the show, parents flooded the hallway with balloons and juice boxes. I waited near the exit, unsure if I should approach. Then Theo ran toward me, cape flapping, eyes wide. You came. I wouldn't miss it for anything. He hugged me tightly. Amanda approached slowly, watching us. I held my breath. Then she said, "We're getting ice cream. You want to come?" It wasn't a grand gesture. It didn't need to be. We walked to the car together. Theo insisted on sitting between us in the back seat. At the parlor, he asked for moonberry swirl, which didn't exist, so we settled for blueberry vanilla. He told us about rehearsals, about how he added the follow the moon line himself. Amanda raised her eyebrows. You ad-libbed that. He grinned. It's from Nana's stories. Amanda gave me a look, not soft but not sharp either. They're good stories. Thanks, I said. Theo ran off to press his face against the ice cream freezer. Amanda stayed behind. He asked me the other night, she said quietly, "Why did you keep Nana away if she's good?" My chest tightened. I didn't know what to say. I still don't. You don't have to answer yet, I said. Just don't lie. Amanda looked down. I didn't lie. I just told him. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes when they're scared. That's true, I said. I've made my share. We sat in silence for a beat. Then Amanda said, "He wants to spend Thanksgiving with you." I blinked. What about you? We'll do lunch. You can do dinner. Fair. I smiled. More than fair. And for the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of who Amanda might have been before the walls, before the fear. A woman trying, failing sometimes, but trying. That night, I updated the blog. Entry title, "The Curtain and the Cape." Healing doesn't come all at once. Sometimes it shows up as a seat at a school recital, or a shared scoop of pretend moonberry ice cream. Sometimes it's not the return of love, but the return of kindness. And that's enough. For now, that's enough. The next morning, a message waited in my inbox. It was from a grandmother in Ohio. Your story helped me believe in tomorrow again. Thank you. And below it, one from a woman in her 20s. My Nana raised me. I haven't seen her since I was 6. I think I'm ready to write to her. That one stopped me. I didn't just cry, I wept. Because this wasn't just my story anymore. It was a ripple, a seed, a chance. I printed that message, framed it, put it next to a photo of Theo in his rocket pajamas. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to dream, not of battle or custody, but of what the future might look like when it was led by grace instead of fear. Theo would come over next weekend. We'd write another letter to the moon, but maybe this time Amanda would help us send it. Theo showed up the following weekend wearing a sweater that read, "I'm a limited edition." He barreled into my arms like a comet full of sugar and stories. We had science fair, he said, barely stopping to breathe. My volcano exploded all over Daniel's project, but the judges still gave me a ribbon. I laughed. Was it an accident or strategic sabotage? He grinned mischievously. Depends who's asking. We spent the morning building a pillow fort empire in the living room. Theo crowned me Empress Nana of Blanketonia. At one point, he whispered, "Do you think Mommy would play this too?" I paused. Maybe you could ask her. I did. She said she's too tired. Well, I said gently, tired doesn't mean she doesn't want to. Sometimes grown-ups forget how to play, that's all. He nodded solemnly. That's sad. Later that afternoon, Amanda texted me. Would you mind if I joined for dinner? My heart skipped. I texted back. We'd like that. She arrived just after sunset holding a small container. My mom's apple crisp recipe, she said. Thought I'd try it. Theo clapped like she'd brought treasure. Mommy, are you gonna play dinner game too? Amanda looked at me confused. I smiled. It's simple. You have to give your food a space name before eating it. Forks are fuel injectors. Napkins are meteor shields. And don't forget to bless the space voyage. Amanda hesitated. Then, to my surprise, she picked up her spoon and said, "Activating orbit sequence. Preparing to enter planet Crisp." Theo beamed. "You're doing it." And for the first time, the three of us shared a meal, not across battle lines, but across galaxies. After dinner, Amanda helped me do dishes. The kitchen filled with the smell of soap and cinnamon, and for a moment it almost felt normal. She said, "I don't know what to do with all the guilt." I dried a plate. "You don't have to do anything with it right now. Just don't let it stop you." "I wasted years," she whispered. "We all waste years," I replied. "That's why we have now." Amanda exhaled. "He keeps asking if we can all go on a trip together." My eyebrows raised. "Just the three of us." She nodded. "He wants to see the moon tower in the observatory. Says it's part of our moon story." I told him I'd think about it. "I'd love to," I said. "Only if you're ready." "I'm trying," she admitted. Still angry at Jake. Still unsure about everything. "But with you I feel less defensive." I turned to her. That's all we ever needed. That night, after Theo fell asleep on the couch surrounded by stuffed animals, Amanda lingered. "I should go," she said, gathering her coat. Then she hesitated. "I was 24 when I had him," she said, terrified. "Isolated. I thought you wanted to take him from me." "I wanted to keep him safe," I said. "But maybe I pushed too hard. Maybe I forgot how fragile new mothers can be." Amanda nodded slowly. "Can I ask a weird question?" "Sure." "Would you ever consider writing about me?" "Not now. Just one day. I think I'd like to remember who I was and who I became." I felt tears burn. "I'd be honored." She smiled, and it reached her eyes for the first time. Then she left quietly. That weekend, Theo and I began planning our moon observatory trip. He drew maps. I packed snacks. Amanda sent links to hotels. For the first time in 5 years, the journey ahead didn't feel like a tug of war. It felt like a constellation, each of us a star finally aligning. The road trip was only 3 hours long, but to Theo it was the equivalent of a voyage to another planet. He sat in the back seat with a pair of toy binoculars and a notebook labeled Mission. Moonlight. Every 20 minutes he'd shout a new observation. Captain's log. Spotted cows. No sign of alien activity. Amanda drove. I navigated. It was the first time we'd all shared a car since before the custody hearing. The silence between her and me was gentler now, no longer jagged or bruised. Just two women who had learned the hard way that love and pain can share a home. At one point, Amanda asked, "Did he always talk this much on car rides?" I chuckled. "Only when the moon was full, or when he had an audience." She glanced at me. "Thanks for letting me come." "You were always invited," I replied. She didn't argue, just pressed her lips together and nodded. We reached the observatory just before sunset. The old dome glistened under a pink sky perched on the edge of a hill like a silver egg about to hatch wonder. Theo ran ahead. "We're gonna see moon craters, right?" "If the sky's clear," Amanda said. The guide led us into the viewing chamber. Massive telescope, dimmed lights, a ceiling that creaked with history. Theo sat between us, his face lit up in awe. The astronomer began the tour talking about phases and orbits, lunar seas and eclipses. Then came the moment. We each got a turn at the telescope. Theo went first. Gasped. "It's real." Amanda leaned in next. Her breath caught. And then, me. I looked through the lens and saw it. A glowing orb full of scars and light. It looked smaller than I remembered from stories, but somehow more honest. I whispered, "Still there. Always." When we stepped outside later, Theo insisted we write another letter to the moon. He handed me his notebook. "Your turn, Nana." So I wrote, "Dear Moon, thank you for watching over the child I love. Thank you for being constant even when we were not. Tonight we three stood beneath your light together. Please keep shining just a little longer. We're still learning how to love without hurting." Theo added a drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands under a silver crescent. Amanda watched me fold the page. "Where do you send them?" I smiled. "I don't. I keep them. But I tell Theo the moon reads them in its own way." Amanda nodded slowly. "I think I'd like to write one too." That night, back at the hotel, she did. I didn't read it. Didn't ask, but I saw her slide it into her purse with care, like something sacred. Before bedtime, we had one last surprise for Theo, a glow-in-the-dark map of the moon for his bedroom ceiling. He squealed, "Now I can visit every night." We laughed and Amanda said, "Don't forget to come back, Space Explorer." Theo hugged her, then me. That night, as he drifted off, I lay awake in the next room listening to the quiet. Amanda knocked softly and entered. She held a blanket, sat at the foot of my bed. "I don't think I ever said thank you," she whispered, "for raising him, for giving him what I couldn't." I reached out and took her hand. "You gave him life," I said. "I just helped him grow until you were ready to bloom beside him." Amanda's eyes filled. "I was so afraid you'd take him. I never wanted to replace you. I only wanted him to have both of us." She nodded. "I believe that now." And there, in the dim hotel light, two mothers sat beside the sleeping boy who once broke us and now was stitching us back together. When we returned home from the trip, something had shifted not just between Amanda and me, but within the air itself. Theo was lighter, more grounded, like the trip had stitched a new thread into his small, beautiful life. He no longer hesitated when moving between houses. There was no longer a sense of choosing sides, only a boy orbiting safely between two worlds that finally stopped colliding. One afternoon, as I baked banana bread, Theo's favorite, Amanda, stopped by unannounced. She held a folder. "I've been working on something," she said. She placed it on the table. "I've started therapy." I blinked. That's good. It's helping me see what I held onto too tightly and what I almost destroyed in the process. She opened the folder. Inside were drawings. Theo's. But not just his. Amanda's too. Simple crayon images of a little boy, a tall grandmother, and a woman with a speech bubble that said, "I'm sorry." I looked up at her. I thought if Theo could tell stories with drawings, maybe I could too. My chest swelled. "You're brave." She exhaled. "I used to think strength was control. Turns out it's surrender." I poured us tea and we sat there, two women with bruised pasts, slowly learning how to walk together without reopening old wounds. Over the next few weeks, Amanda invited me to more moments, parent-teacher meetings, Halloween planning, even a quiet Sunday at the zoo. At first, I wasn't sure how to navigate it. I was used to fighting for space. Now space was being offered, and it felt strange to receive it without suspicion. One night, Theo asked, "Can I sleep over at Nana's again?" Amanda nodded. "Of course." He squealed and she added, "But only if she lets you brush your teeth this time." We both laughed. That evening, after Theo fell asleep after stories, snacks, and one too many knock-knock jokes, I sat by his bed and whispered, "I missed this." He stirred. "Me too." I walked out and found my phone buzzing. A message from Amanda. "Thank you for loving him so well that it taught me how." I held the phone to my chest. I didn't need an apology carved in stone. That one line carried more healing than court documents or supervised visits ever could. The blog began gaining traction. Other grandparents started messaging me. Some felt vindicated. Others shared heartbreaks still unresolved. One wrote, "You make me feel less invisible." I printed it, pinned it beside Theo's moon drawing. Amanda started contributing small posts to the blog. Anonymous but raw. Her first entry read, "I almost erased a woman because I was afraid she'd outshine me." But she was never trying to shine alone. She was holding a light for both of us. I cried when I read it. The next morning she texted, "Too much?" I replied, "Perfect." We didn't pretend we were fixed. Healing isn't a clean line, it's a maze with mirrors and monsters. But we were learning the route together. Thanksgiving came. Theo helped me set the table. Amanda arrived with a cranberry tart and her cautious heart in her hands. We held hands before eating. Theo asked to say something. "Thank you for finding your way back to each other," he said. Then, without missing a beat, "And thank you for pie." We all laughed. Later that night, Amanda lingered in the doorway. "Do you think one day we could all take a vacation, like a real one?" I looked at her. "We already did." She smiled. "Fair?" And with that, she left. The blog entry that night read, "There's a kind of quiet miracle in forgiveness. It doesn't roar, it hums. It creeps into a room like dawn unnoticed at first until suddenly you realize. The darkness isn't gone, but the light has arrived anyway. A few months later, on a chilly Friday in January, I received a call from Theo's school. He had fallen during recess. Nothing serious, just a scraped knee, but he'd asked for me, not Amanda. When I arrived, he limped toward me with exaggerated drama. "Nana," he moaned, "I think I lost a quart of blood." The nurse chuckled. "He's quite the actor." I helped him into the car. On the ride home, he was unusually quiet. "What's on your mind, Moonwalker?" I asked. He stared out the window. "Why can't all three of us live in one house?" I didn't have an answer. I gave him a smile that hid the ache. "Because we each have our own stars to follow, sweetheart. But we're in the same sky." Later that day, Amanda stopped by. He told me what he said. She said, voice soft. I didn't know how to answer. "You did fine," she replied. "But maybe it's time we talked." We sat at my kitchen table, the same one that had witnessed years of tension, tears, and now, the slow thawing of estrangement. Amanda inhaled. "I've been thinking of moving." I tensed. "Where?" "Not far. Just closer. There's a duplex available. Theo would have a yard. You'd be 5 minutes away." I blinked. "Amanda, I'm not saying we merge our lives, but a little overlap wouldn't hurt. Theo already thinks we're some weird cosmic family." I laughed despite the sudden tears. "Maybe we are." She placed her hand on mine. "I want him to remember love, not custody battles, not whispered resentment." I nodded. "That's all I ever wanted." Amanda looked around the kitchen. "He keeps talking about hosting a moon party." I grinned. "He's been planning that for years." "Well," she said, "I think it's time." That weekend, we threw the first annual Mercer Moon Party. Theo insisted on invitations, costumes, and a playlist of space songs. He wore a cardboard helmet. Amanda dressed in silver. I came as a lunar librarian. Neighbors came. Teachers. Even the school nurse. Theo stood on a little stool and made a speech. "I want to thank my Nana and my mom. They both love me so much. Sometimes we used to fight, but now we make moon pies together. That's better." Laughter and applause. Amanda and I exchanged a glance. Then we hugged. Not the tentative kind we used to offer out of politeness, but the real kind. The kind that says, "We've been through something, and we're still here." Later, as we cleaned up, Amanda said, "You're not just his grandmother, you know?" "I know. You're part of my story too." That night, I updated the blog. Once upon a time, I thought motherhood had borders, roles that couldn't overlap, responsibilities that needed defending. But today, I stood beside the woman who once tried to erase me. And together, we watched a little boy eat his third moon pie while declaring we were both his favorites. The post went viral. Messages poured in. Grandparents, mothers, even adult children who had grown up in custody storms. One woman wrote, "Your story gives me hope that one day my mother-in-law and I might find each other again." I sat in bed reading those messages, heart full. We weren't just healing. We were helping others begin theirs. That weekend, Amanda asked if I wanted to co-sign the lease on the new duplex. "Not because I need help," she clarified, "but because I want you to know you belong." I stared at her. I've always felt like a visitor in Theo's life. This would make me family again. She nodded. "You never stopped being that." The day we moved into our side-by-side duplexes was bathed in sunlight and the scent of cardboard. Theo ran back and forth between the two front doors like a postal carrier with too many deliveries. "I'm the messenger of the moon," he declared, arms full of his stuffed animals, splitting them equally between my unit and Amanda's. Amanda stood at her door, clipboard in hand, orchestrating the chaos. I watched her for a moment. Hair tied up, t-shirt smeared with dust, completely immersed in making this life fit into new walls. She caught me looking and grinned. "Did you ever imagine this day?" I smiled. "Only in the last chapter of a very stubborn fairy tale." Inside my unit, Theo helped me place photo frames on shelves. "Don't forget this one," he said, handing me the drawing he made after the observatory trip, 3 stick figures under a crescent moon. I placed it front and center. As we unpacked, Amanda came over with 2 mugs of tea. "Peace offering," she said, handing me one. "No more battles." I took it. "Just bedtime negotiations and shared holiday planning." She laughed. "I can handle that." As night fell, Theo asked if we could do a moon check. We stepped out together, all three of us, onto the shared porch between our doors. The moon hung above, glowing gently as if winking at our strange little constellation. Theo pointed up. Still there. Amanda wrapped her arm around his shoulders. I reached for his hand. And for the first time, we stood not as opponents, not as reluctant allies, but as a family. Imperfect. Repaired. Enough. Later that week, Theo's teacher emailed to say he'd written a story during class. Once there was a boy who had 2 homes. But really, he had one big family. They didn't always agree, but they always came to his moon parties. And the moon loved them all the same. I printed it, framed it, placed it beside the crayon drawing. That night, as I closed my laptop, I added one final entry to the blog. Love is not a custody arrangement. It's not a document or a bloodline. It's who shows up even when they have every reason not to. And sometimes love begins again, not because we forget what happened, but because we choose what happens next. Amanda read it the next morning. She sent me a single emoji. Theo added his own comment. Don't forget the next moon party. We need more marshmallows. As I watched him chase fireflies in the yard between our homes, I realized we had rebuilt something, not the old life, something better. And beneath that faithful moon, our story would continue quieter now, but no less sacred. I raised my grandson Theo for 5 years, through scraped knees, stargazing nights, and bedtime stories. He made me repeat until the stars blinked out. Then his mother Amanda said I couldn't see him anymore. What followed was not a courtroom war, but something even more brutal. A slow unraveling of family love, trust, and memory. But we found our way back. Not through apologies shouted in rage, but through whispered moments, shared tears, and one little boy who refused to let us forget we were all orbiting the same love. From custody hearings to moon parties, we transformed bitterness into belonging. This story is not just mine. It's for every grandmother raising a grandchild, every mother who doubts she can begin again, every child who holds up a crayon drawing and says, "This is us." Because love is never neat. It's messy, inconvenient, and sometimes painful. But if you stay, if you choose again and again to forgive, to reach out, it becomes something unshakable. Thank you for walking through this journey with me. Subscribe to Grace's Truth for more stories where silence becomes strength and love. Though bruised, always finds its way home. Until the next moon party.